like to start by thanking Serene for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here, and in general, what Serene is doing in terms of knowledge mobilization is great. As Benoit mentioned, this is not going to be a technical talk. You guys are here, so I'm happy that you weren't scared away by the word quantum in it. I'm from an IT management department in Ryerson's Ted Rogers School of Management, obviously. So we look at it from an IT management perspective, not from purely crypto or very technical. So we'll get to some crypto and technical aspects of it, but to cover our bases and make sure that we have the right foundation to basically go forward and talk about the strategic implications of quantum-resistant cryptography for businesses, basically. So what does an IT manager need to do, all the way to what does a CISO need to do, or need to know now to be able to make the transition that is imminent. It's going to happen in the next decade or so, more smooth, less painful, and basically less costly. At the end of the day, it's all about money, right? Okie dokie. And I'd like to acknowledge our partners in this work. So ICERA is our industry partner. They sponsored the work, and also we got we leveraged that with Ontario Center of Excellence through a VIP1 fund, basically. And this is joint work between me and my MBA student, Robert Fullert. Okie dokie. So this one slide is supposed to tell you what we're going to do today. It's motivation, so hopefully it's going to motivate you why we're here and what we want to learn at the end of the day. So quantum computers will soon defeat currently standardized measures, more specifically public cryptography, that we're going to talk about it. So currently standardized information security measures that basically we use to protect our confidential information. Okay. Now, what is soon? We'll try to talk about that. It means different things to different people, we'll see. But that's okay. So they're going to soon become a reality. No longer a science fiction. There are companies there that are actually building quantum computers now. Whether or not they can defeat, our current measures in 5 years or in 10 years, that's up to debate, but we'll get there. So quantum-resistant cryptography, information security cryptographic measures that are going to resist these quantum computers are available now, but they're not standardized. Well, timelines of the standardization is going to be 2024 at the earliest. So what can we do now to basically make it easier for us when this becomes a reality? To some people, 2024 might be years ahead, but actually we'll see some industry vectors. It's already too late for you to plan, at least have a roadmap. So you have to actually look at it now to make sure when it comes, you're agile enough to actually transition to this new piece of technology. So we need to plan the transition for quantum-resistant security now. Obviously, it depends on what kind of assets you're trying to protect, what kind of industry you're working for. And we'd like to, as researchers, we'd like to aid business managers in minimizing their cost and complexity of this quantum transition. Okay, so this is what we're going to do basically today. So I'll start. So the first half of the talk is going to be about how quantum computers are going to affect our current information security practices and best practices and measures, basically. And the second half is going to be where we provide some recommendations as to what is it that you need to do now, or have a roadmap of what you want to do in your future. Okay, so we'll have some basic information security / crypto slides. Some of you may already, be very familiar about the next few slides, the context of the next new slide. But for the benefit of the rest of you, we're going to spend some time to make sure that we're all on the same page and all the foundations are covered. But as I promised earlier, I'm not going to go into a lot of technical details. It's just going to be just covering all the grounds. Okay, so what is computer security? We're here, GoSec, so we know that we need to protect our hardware, software, information or data, and the channel of communication. So we all know that. Information security budget is really plummeting, and I'd like you to look at this second bullet where it says where it says cost of cybercrimes projected at over 1 trillion per year by 2020. And that's, some people say this is even very conservative. It's being optimistic. Okay, and data breaches are happening all the time. And not only, so we learned about, this morning we learned about how sophisticated they're getting, and that some of the, even IT managers are being surprised. And not only they're more pervasive, these attacks, they're becoming more sophisticated. And quantum computers, once available, are going to only help the attackers. Okay, so if we don't do what we need to do, if we don't take it seriously now. Okay, so this is just basically to say that we got to do this. And certain industries are at higher risk compared to other industries. Okay, like government information, obviously, finance, so all the banks, and health, so your medical records. Why is that? Because you know, people can basically take this against you if there's a medical record. If I have a certain operation, I don't want my insurance company to know that necessarily. Or if I'm a celebrity, I don't want them to know that I had this condition or that condition necessarily. And we know of cases where this was taken against them and they had to pay a ransom so that, you know, the person who had access to this would keep quiet. And so things like this happen all the time. And obviously the government and financial industry, banks, they have a lot of budget to basically make sure things like this don't happen. And the information that is more attractive to the hackers, they have, you know, they're going to culminate to a lot of money for the hackers, are going to be the first ones to be attacked. As a result, these industry verticals, they need to make sure that they're well prepared for this quantum revolution that is yet to come. Okay, so whereas maybe some other industries, think about media or think about agriculture or education, they should be concerned, but not as concerned as a bank, for instance. Okay, so because historically, hackers, at least so far, haven't been as interested in their confidential data as they have been in these other data. Okay, so as we said, a piece of record, depending on what kind of record it is in the respective industries, could have a different value. But on average, according to IPM, it's $160. So it's just one single record. That's like my password or my social insurance number. But then the aggregate, or when you look at it from different industries, the numbers are going to be very skewed, very much larger or much lower. Okay, so what do we do in information security in general? We have this CIA chart, not the CIA, and down in the US, this is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Okay, so that's how, so all of those of us who have taken CISSP, we know this by heart, that you need to provide confidentiality of information, integrity of your information, and make sure that your systems are always available. Okay, so these are the three things that we need to do. So what do we do to provide confidentiality, integrity, or availability? Again, our industry, our InfoSec industry, has very standardized primitives. You have lots of vendors next door who would tell you how they can do this better than any other vendor. So we're going to stay away from that, but we look at cryptography in particular, and that is going to transition us to quantum computers and how they're going to change the crypto that we use, the crypto that is standardized today. Okay, so crypto can directly help with confidentiality and integrity. Crypto can also help you with some, you know, availability, but indirectly. Okay, so but encryption, you use encryption to provide confidentiality, and we'll talk about integrity as well. So cryptography. So you know about it, just a little bit of background. Is now, although it's not a new science, it's been around. The first modern encryption algorithm or a cipher was first used by Julius Caesar. So it's actually quite ancient. But right now it's very ubiquitous, and it's protecting our digital information, and information is encrypted usually by means of a key. And that key is, you know, strings of zeros and ones. It's a file that you're supposed to keep secret and private and protected. Because if anyone has that key, basically they have the key to all of your confidential information. You don't want that to happen. So this is the encryption process. You have the plain text, which is the text in plain English, let's say. That's why we call it plain text. And you have the key. You encrypt it. It becomes a ciphertext. So it's ciphered now, so it's encrypted now. And at any point in time you want to decrypt it, you use another key, maybe the same, maybe different. We'll see that in the next slide. And it should give you, excuse me, the plain text back. Okay, so very basic notion of crypto. So now we have two types of cryptography. Let's look at these two diagrams. So basically, these are the same diagrams. They're just showing you if it's the same key or a different key that is used at the encryption and the decryption stages. Okay, so we have in the diagram above, you have the plain text. You're encrypting it with a secret key that you're supposed to keep secret. Okay, and then you use the same key when you're decrypting, same key. So we call it symmetric cryptography because it's the same key. Okay, or secret key cryptography because you're supposed to keep that key secret. Okay, asymmetric cryptography is when you use two different keys, public key versus secret key. Okay, so you use a public key, which is a key that is public, hence the name, when you're encrypting, and it gives you the ciphertext, the encrypted text that you can exchange, and you put it on the internet. And then you use a different key, okay, which is a private key. And sorry, there's a typo here. This is supposed to say private key, not secret key. It's a private key, and that private key basically is going to decrypt it and give you the plain text back. Okay, so because you were dealing with a pair of public key and private key, we call it public key encryption. Okay, and you can do digital signatures with it, not only just encryption. So we have two types of cryptography. Okay, and then standardized cryptography today have these, different categories. You have hash algorithms that are message digests, like a fingerprint of what you're trying to send. You've heard of MD5, I'm sure. It's now only being used. It shouldn't be used for digital signatures. It's used for password hashing. You've heard of SHA-1, Secure Hash Algorithm 1, and SHA-256, Secure Hash Algorithm 2 or 256. So these are the ones that are being used right now. So SHA-1 was, so the industry went through this transition from SHA-1 to SHA-2 a couple years ago. And then just last year, or earlier this year, we saw that there was an actual practical attack against SHA-1. So there was an illustration that you can actually have a collision for SHA-1. So that's hash algorithms. Then symmetric key cryptography and asymmetric key cryptography. Some of the attributes of these is that, symmetric key algorithms are very efficient, but you have to make sure that the two people who are sending and receiving messages, they have the same key, they have the same secret key. And as you are doing this, exchange of keys, you have to worry about key management. So the key shouldn't be compromised as it's being sent to, shared with the other person. And examples of this is DES, triple DES and AES. DES is no longer considered secure. Triple DES and AES. So most of you in your organizations are still using triple DES. If you have taken care of the transition between triple DES and AES, good job. Asymmetric key cryptography, the common use of it is when you exchange the symmetric keys, the secret keys that you use in symmetric key algorithms. It's not as fast as symmetric key cryptography, so because of the kind of mathematics that it uses, the operations are heavier and more tedious and require more power, basically. But we use them to exchange those keys that we mentioned. Key management was tedious, right? And then examples are RSA and ECC. I'm sure all of you are familiar with RSA, ECC, elliptic curve cryptography. Both of these you can do encryption and digital signatures with them. But then how do you manage the keys, the private and public keys? You need to have a public key infrastructure. So that's a caveat with this. But overall, these are standardized or standardization bodies such as NIST have tables that they'll show you you're supposed to use RSA with this key, and anything less than this size for the key is not secure enough, and so on and so forth. Okay? So this is standardized cryptography, and why do we believe that these tables that are provided by NIST are actually telling us what we need to hear, that these are secure? Okay, security of standardized cryptography. So they have stood the test of time. What do we mean by that? So stand the test of time. What do we mean by that? So anytime that there's a new mathematical algorithm for an encryption scheme, let's say, anytime this is proposed, it goes through years, if not decades, of scrutiny by both academia and the industry professionals before they become recommended by any organizations such as NIST or Etsi, the European counterpart for standardization of these algorithms. So industry and academia scrutiny prior to standardization and obviously widespread use, right? No vendor is going to provide you with recommendation that you should go off of RSA and ECC and do this quantum cool thing now, because no standardization body has basically provided that green light yet. Okay, so at best they'll do some hybrid, but we'll get to the hybrid scenarios. So current computers, and if you notice, I have current, and current computers take a very long time to break current cryptographic primitives that we saw in the previous page, like RSA and ECC and AES and triple disk. Current computers take a very long time. So we know, we have a level of comfort that this is going to take place, unless there's a breakthrough, such as quantum computers. So current computers take a long time because it's hard for them to solve certain hard mathematical problems. Okay? Again, I promise that we're not going to go into a lot of the detail on these hard math problems, but let's just look at some of the names, okay? Integer factorization problem is a mathematical hard problem that is basically providing you the security of variations of RSA. So we're not going to go into a lot of detail, but what is integer factorization problem? I give you the product of two large primes without giving you the two large primes, and it's going to be very difficult for current computers to tell me what are those two large primes that I multiply to get that big product, okay? So discrete logarithm problem is another problem that is basically, variations of it is used in ECC and ECC type encryptions. So basically we said current computers are going to take a long time. What is that? Researchers have quantified what is long time for specific algorithms with assumptions of specific processing powers, taking into consideration that processing power is going to, based on rules and based on the historic trends, are going to become more and more sophisticated and increase. So with all of that, we have a level of comfort that it's not going to happen anytime soon with current computers. Okay, so current we call also classical computers. And the next slide I'll tell you what is classic versus quantum computers. But before we get there, so data that is observed in transit in encrypted form now, for instance, it's traversing the internet, is your data in transit, can be harvested, can be stored in encrypted form because they don't have the key. And we just said that RSA and ECC are still considered secure. In encrypted form, it can be harvested, it could be stored. But then with the hope, with the attacker is hoping that sometime in the future, they'll be able to either by means of a breakthrough such as quantum computers or a very creative attack against these mathematical problems or these encryption schemes, they're going to be able to decrypt it. So harvest now, decrypt later. Okay, so we've had this before, this kind of mindset of an attacker. Maybe I can't do anything right now as this is traversing the internet, but let me store it, let me harvest it, and then let me see what I can do about it later. This is in particular very sensitive, a very important attack scenario or mindset of an attacker if the shelf life of your confidential information is actually yours. For instance, if it's my medical records, if it's my social insurance number, I want it to be secure for my lifetime. Okay? If it's my credit card information, your credit card, number changes after a few years, right? And you can go and say, it was hacked, or it was spoofed, or whatever, and then they give you a new card. Sometimes you don't even know the bank is sending you a new card. So that information the shelf life of that information is much shorter than the shelf life of my medical record, for instance, okay? So if the shelf life of the confidential information that your organizations are trying to keep secure, for instance, whistleblower information, okay, that kind of information you want to keep secure, hopefully forever. At least you want to have the capabilities of keeping that kind of information secure and confidential forever. So the shelf life of such information is much longer than shelf life of what's happening on the trading floor in a bank, because the transaction is going to settle, in the next day or so, or maybe even that same day. A week from now, that's obsolete because it's public information anyway. Okay, so let's be mindful of the fact that the shelf life is going to play into where and how we want to keep information confidential for much longer time, okay? Now, we talked about current computers. We call them classical computers, okay? So this slide, we're going to talk about a little bit of the differences between a quantum computer versus a classical computer. So all of these computers, our phones, the servers that we use, these are classical computers. In this context, are called classical computers. The reason being is that we have bits, okay? So bits are either ones and 1 or 0. So if you want to represent any piece of information, we bring it down to the level of 1s and 0s. In electronics level, it's a current that is either going or it's stopped. Okay, so if the current is going, it's 1. If it's stopped, it's 1. And then we accumulate more of the bits, and then we represent characters and numbers, and then those characters and whatever we're representing with 1s and 0s, they constitute to a larger message or a larger file, and then that becomes your social insurance number or your medical record or basically the information that a bank is trying to keep confidential. Okay, so that we're going to that level of detail. It's 1 or 0. Now, that's for classical computers. For quantum computers, we have something similar to bits, but they're different. So we call them quantum bits. Okay, so what are quantum bits? Or qubits. Okay, so qubits are simultaneously both 0 and 1. A bit is either 0 or a 1. It can't be both. Okay, a qubit, it's both a 0 and a 1 at the same time, kind of. So with a certain probability, it's going to be 0. With a complementing probability, it's going to be 1. We just don't know when we look at that qubit unless we measure it in quantum mechanics. So measuring a qubit in quantum mechanics, again, we're not going to go into a lot of detail, but just for the purpose of this talk, it's important to know that qubits with a certain probability can be 0 and 1 simultaneously, and bits were zeros, either 0s or 1s, okay? Because of this difference in the physical layer of what's going on electron levels, let's say, quantum computers process information very differently, okay? Very differently. As a result, they give rise to new algorithms. Because they're processing information very differently, they give rise to new algorithms. And the new algorithms for quantum computers, the very famous ones, so the two famous ones are Grover's search algorithm and Shor's factoring algorithm. So the Shor factoring algorithm should remind you of the integer factorization problem that we just talked about, okay? So these two are going to allow a quantum computer or a hacker who has access to an attack-capable quantum computer to basically break RSA at will. So we'll see that in the next slide. So just to recap this slide, they can solve certain problems, not all of the problems, so it's not that bad. They can solve certain problems much faster than current classic computers, and they affect the security of currently standardized cryptography, obviously. Okay, so let's look at this. So quantum algorithms, we said, they solve certain problems faster, and those problems include integer factorization problem and discrete logarithm problem. Okay, and as a result, RSA and ECC are going to be broken. Whereas quantum computers can achieve speed ups against symmetric cryptography. So the hash functions and the symmetric key algorithms that you have, like AES, they just need a larger key size or a larger output for the hash function. They're not going to be completely broken. So the effect of quantum algorithms or quantum computers on standardized cryptography could be in two different flavors. Where effective security level is reduced, just like the symmetric key cryptography like AES or hash algorithms, all you need to do is to increase the key or hash length, and you'll be good, okay? The bigger problem is where effective level of security is completely broken. So what do you need to do? Come up with new algorithms. RSA is not going to be good enough at all because it's going to be completely broken. Same goes with ACC. So this table is basically trying to show you that what you need to do with AES is basically once you have the quantum, so post-quantum, I have a slide that I'll go through what that term really means. So once you have a quantum computer that is capable of doing this, it's as if the size of the key is basically half the size that you put. And this is the quantum algorithm that is allowing you to do that. And then asymmetric cryptography that is currently standardized, all of them are going to be broken, and these are the hash functions. Okay? Okie dokie. So this is the slide that I promised you. So how about non-standardized crypto algorithms? So in this slide, we had the standardized crypto algorithms that appear in a NIST table or in an Etsy table that it tells you what you really need to do. If you're, worrying about confidentiality in your organization. So, but this is standardized crypto. We have non-standardized crypto as well. Okay, so within the crypto community, people have been working on post-quantum cryptography for years now. This is nothing new. Right? 15 years ago, 10 years ago, there were cryptographers who were developing or designing post-quantum algorithms. And you'll ask, well, if they've been around for that long, why haven't they been standardized? Or why do we have a problem now? The problem is that these post-quantum cryptography algorithms aren't as nearly efficient as RSA. Okay, and as you know, the CISO and the vendors have this mindset that if it's not broken, why fix it? They really thought of a quantum computer as something that was of a science fiction nature up until very recently. That NSA said that no, this is real. We have to come up with a basically competition that will have alternatives, so alternatives for suit P. So quantum safe is a term that is equivalent to post-quantum, but vendors basically came up with it. Future-proof cryptography is another very vague term that vendors came up with it. NSA or NIST, they rather use quantum-resistant cryptography, which is now basically the base. So these are some of the names of the quantum-resistant cryptography that have been used, and they're basically competing to become the winner, where NSA says, oh, this is the winner, or these are the sets of winner, and go ahead and use it. But the timelines is, the timelines of the actual quantum computers, they're estimated to be anywhere here between 5 to 30 years. We don't know, because we still have some engineering and architectural problems to tackle before we actually have an attack-capable quantum computers. But once they're available, so all these things that we mentioned, RSA and ACC is going to be broken, is there anything that we can do now? Okay, so in terms of timelines of the standardization, NIST came and said, I'm going to give you until 2022 to bring me your quantum-resistant primitives, candidates, and by 2023, I'm going to have a draft standardized. But then in information security, as we know, there's a lot that needs to happen before an industry-wide transition. Okay. What is it that we can do until then? Okay, you look at the past crypto transitions. In a way, this is going to be just like any other past crypto transition that you went through. As I mentioned, SHA-1 to SHA-2 just happened a couple of years ago. Okay. Prior to that, we had DES to triple DES. Some have already gone through triple DES to AES. And RSA 1024 to 2048. These are transitioning from one crypto to another crypto, one soon to be obsolete crypto to a new crypto. So this is just like that, right? So it's another transition. The problem is the nature of these new algorithms that you need to basically implement means that you may need to change some of your hardware. For instance, a router may not be able to handle the capacity that is required by these new quantum. So that's why industry-wide is going to be a problem, and that's why we talk about crypto agility. So if you have vendor locking, if you have size of the output of your hash function hard-coded on a piece of hardware, you don't have crypto agility. And you do not need to wait until 2024 to actually instill or provide crypto agility in your system. That's something that you can do right now, okay? To prepare for this industry-wide quantum transition, you can try to come up with crypto agility strategies right now so that this is going to help you in the future. And typically organizations resist undertaking such complex work without sufficient cost, but hopefully the flags that NSA have basically raised would convince all the, your bosses or your boss's boss that they need to do this, they need to invest time now so that when the quantum computers, attack-capable quantum computers are available, this is not going to be a huge problem. Okay, so planning this industry-wide quantum transition, basically everybody on the crypto side, on the computer science part, they know about these quantum algorithms, okay? But in information security settings, there's a lot of basically challenges as to, okay, how is this going to impact me? What is it that I need to do now? Okay, so these are the gaps that we try to address. And that's why we have this slide, which is going to be the last slide I spent some time on. So these are basically, it encapsulates all of our recommendations, okay? So everybody needs to do that first column that says now. So on top I have now, 2023 to 2030, okay? That's the timelines. Now, everybody needs to establish or empower the information security governance team that they have, okay? Big organizations that are like banks, insurance companies, government that have, they're highly regulated and they have to comply with a lot of regulations. They already have a huge information security budget and everything else. But medium to small organizations, they may not have. They may take this actually for granted, but this is something that they need to do. And then after that, they need to assess their current cryptography, because even in those large organizations, sometimes you don't even know where all of your crypto is. So you need to actually come up with where exactly everything is and then take these actions, okay? So from A to C, A is not much effort right now, but you'll have high exposure. And C is a lot of effort now, but low exposure. Okay, so if you're a big company and you really, the shelf life of the assets that you're trying to really keep confidential is, very long, you want to be in C, where you want to invest in crypto agility, make sure that you don't have vendor locking, make sure that once that algorithm is available, you can just transition. It's not going to happen over time, okay? But at least you have the rudimentary measures in place that you have the agility to actually do that. And then maintain post-quantum roadmap. So what do you want to do afterwards? You actually know where all your crypto is to make that transition. And then in the meantime, you can implement hybrid cryptography, which means don't move away from using RSA and ECC and all the good things that are currently standardized, but as a hybrid measure, also encrypt the stuff that you really care about with quantum-resistant cryptography, okay? And then in between, you have don't implement hybrid cryptography because it costs a lot and you don't have that budget, but at least invest in crypto agility and make sure that you maintain post-quantum roadmap. And then the first one, which is the worst one, do nothing, just wait for 2023, and then you'll run the risk of basically not having enough time to do this complex transition, basically. So with that, I'd like to thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.